You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of 40 Thrive. I'm so happy you are here. Thank you for joining me. On today's episode, I have a lovely and lively chat with Katy Garretson. Katy is a TV director. I'm sure you've seen her work from Two Broke Girls, Fuller House, Young and Hungry, REBA, George Lopez, School of Rock, Girlfriends, the new PUNKY BREWSTER coming out in 2021. Yeah, I was surprised by that too. Katy is an on-demand director. She's been nominated for awards. She's amazing. She also teaches a graduate course on directing at the School of Cinematic Arts at USC, but many of you might know her as the host of the new podcast, Mojo Girl Madness. Katy is also one of my star amazing students / clients that I've had the absolute pleasure to work with over the last several months. What's really interesting is that Katy's got all this success in these different areas. She is living the dream. She's doing the work. And it took her quite a while to actually launch her podcast. And I will admit, I was the same way. Even as a podcast coach, it took me over a year after announcing 40 Thrive was going to be a podcast to actually launch it. It's a scary process. But like so many others, Katy was able to push through and make it happen. And her show is really, really good. One of the things I noticed about Katy is she doesn't really talk about vulnerability and authenticity necessarily, but she lives it. At a time where we see posts on Instagram that talk about how we should be vulnerable and authentic and true to ourselves and all of that, while it's all slick and edited and, filtered, I really wanted to have a conversation with Katy about authenticity, vulnerability, how we show up, not only online and in podcasts, but in the world, right? And how we connect with others and how, without being authentic and vulnerable, we actually can't find true human connection. So we dive into some hopes, dreams, fears, all those things in this conversation. Before we get started, if you have been thinking about starting a podcast, if this is like one of those maybe 2020, possibly 2021 goals, I got you. You know what? I even made you a fancy little ad to hear more. Roll it. You have a message brewing inside of you. You've got something to say, but you don't even know where to begin. I'm Jackie McDougall, podcast coach and consultant. After 2 decades in TV, I discovered the power of podcasting. Now I teach people just like you how to start and grow their show. From concept to launch, marketing, monetization, and so much more. Plus a private community to ask questions and connect with other podcasters. For a limited time, my DIY podcast launch program is 50% off. Visit JackieMcDougall.com for more info. If you've been thinking about that podcast, this is the best time to do it. So let's do it together. Okay, back to today's episode. Here's my conversation with my client, student, friend, one of my favorite people, Katy Garretson. Katy G, welcome to 40 Thrive.
Jackie M, thank you for having me.
So as I said in your intro, you're one of my favorite people.
Likewise.
It's very rare that I go, oh yes, I will produce your podcast, as opposed to just teach. And I'm having so much fun. It's such a good show.
Thank you so much. You've kind of changed my life by stepping in and helping me get it going. It's a scary thing launching a podcast.
Yes. And that's the thing, like if someone's listening and they're like, I don't care about launching a podcast, that's fine. That's not what this is about. No. But we learn so much about ourselves and other people by doing a podcast. It's really... If I could get everyone in the world to start a podcast just to learn things about themselves, I would do it.
It's so true. And people I've known for decades are saying, wow, I didn't know this about you. I didn't know that about you. And it's kind of a freeing, empowering thing to be able to share yourself and your experiences and talk about life and love and everything that goes into all of that. And also to talk to other people about it.
Yeah. And a little bit later, I want to get into vulnerability and authenticity, because I think those are 2 words that people think they have an idea of how to show up with both of those, but I think a lot of people are doing it wrong. So I'm just going to tease that for now.
Okay.
But before we get into that, Mojo Girl Madness, like what the hell is Mojo to you?
I remember when I took your class, which is awesome, by the way, and really got me on this road to doing the podcast. Mojo Girl Madness. I know when you first heard that title, you're like, what the hell is she talking about? What kind of a title is that? It doesn't tell you anything about you. And yet it does, because it's a mad pod. And mad doesn't necessarily mean crazy. It also doesn't necessarily mean angry. It can also be madly in love. So sometimes I talk about things that I'm madly in love with and want to share it with the world. It's kind of evolved, I think, into being a little bit of everything. And I'm really enjoying it.
Which brings us back to the question in that, what is Mojo? What does that mean to you?
You know, it's funny. I think it means different things on different days. And I think it means different things to different people. And I guess if I were to summarize overall, it's being comfortable with who you are, being confident in yourself, and being happy being you. Yeah. When I'm happy being me, I got my mojo. Yeah. And that means I'm comfortable in my own skin. It means I'm confident that I'm going to tackle whatever's ahead of me. Now, how you get to being that is the challenging part. You can have your mojo, not have your mojo, and it's all that in-between stuff. You know, what leads you in which direction. Like I said, some days I have my mojo if I feel like I have a particularly good hair day, you know?
Right. Hair mojo is very real.
Hair mojo's real, yeah. I know it's horrible to put so much stock in appearance, but that's our culture, that's our society, that's what we grew up with, and it's very challenging as we get older. But you know, if I feel like I look okay, that's a little piece of my mojo. Yeah. And so I make that effort knowing that, you know, whenever I've got a big stressful event coming up, I always make sure right before I'm going to get my hair done, I'm going to do my nails, I'm going to, you know, do all that kind of stuff. So I feel as good as I can about myself. And then I think preparation in whatever you're doing also gives you mojo. Like when I work, I'm a TV director. I would have zero mojo if I walked on set and I hadn't prepared. I'd be freaking out. The more prepared I am to tackle whatever the day brings, whether it's in work or play or travel or whatever, the more prepared I am, the more mojo I have. And so, you know, it depends on the day and on what's affecting me. I hate being, and this is very me, I hate being dependent on people. I grew up the child of an alcoholic, and codependency is something that I've read so much about, I've studied, I've tried not to be. It's really hard to find that comfort within yourself and not be dependent upon getting it from someone else, being able to tell yourself you're all that. Right. And when I have those days where I say that to myself, screw what anybody else thinks. Nobody else matters. I'm here to present myself to the world, do the best work I can do, be the best person I can be. And it's a lot easier to do all of that when you're feeling good with who you are.
Right. So mojo is basically an inside job.
Absolutely. Abso-frickin-lutely. Yes.
I think in a time where everybody's looking for likes and hearts on Instagram and things like that, really understanding what gives you mojo within yourself is so important. So the really important point I want to make is that you can't really find your mojo without going through some shit.
Yeah.
I think that it's actually those of us, and let's be honest, anyone over 40 has been through a couple things. Yeah. So by going through experiences in your life that were less than ideal, I think is exactly what we need in order to prioritize and find our mojo.
Those moments where you feel proud of yourself, yes, where you've accomplished something, where you've met the challenge, all of those things feed into your mojo. As opposed to what you were saying a moment ago about social media and the likes and whatnot. my God, that we value our self-worth off of how many people wish us happy birthday on Facebook is just crazy. And we all fall into that trap now. What is our self-worth if nobody likes this post? That is just that you're getting it from outside. You got to get it from inside, the inside job. And it's a tough thing to remember these days. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Life experience, the old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right.
What doesn't kill you gives you your mojo.
Yeah. Okay, that's the quote that's going in the graphic that's going on Instagram. What doesn't kill you gives you your mojo.
Sometimes I surprise myself and I say things I actually like.
That's going to be on Wikipedia before the end of the day. I think you're absolutely right. And, some of the buzzwords that we hear from online courses and podcasts and Instagram, I want to talk about authenticity because one of the things that you have nailed on your podcast is authenticity, in that there are times where, I don't know if I'm sure you remember, I would text you and go, are you sure you want to say that? Are you sure?
I know. Well, you don't say that to me anymore because that was in the first few episodes. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to say it. What's the worst that can happen? Please. Somebody rolls their eyes out there like they don't do that to me anyway. I mean, what they think is none of my business, basically.
Yeah. Well, a couple of them I was like, oh, you may not want to say that. I don't know if that person's litigious. But
I did change a couple of things along the way. But I just
mean, yes, but the authenticity didn't change. Like you are willing to talk about some really dark, life-changing, maybe not so proud moments in your life, and do it with such grace and such a freaking sense of humor. Like you laugh at yourself better than most people.
Well, tragedy is comedy, and I've had a lot of tragic things in my life. But I think a lot of people wouldn't realize that. And that's what took people off guard listening to some of the things that I talk about, because I don't share that stuff. There are some people that on social media post about every hardship, every illness, every this, every that. And I'm not one of those people. I'm very protective of, I hate to use the word image, but it's your image and what I project out. And I can't tell you how freeing it is and how great it's been for my mojo to get personal. I remember I was with my friends, Jim and Barb, years and years ago. I'm sitting in their hot tub with Barb, and I told her something about growing up, and she goes, wow, you should tell people that more often. And it kind of struck me, and it obviously stuck with me, that we don't share the dark stuff, the hard stuff, the sad stuff. And because we don't share that stuff, we tend to think that we're the only ones going through it.
Yes.
And we tend to only have the perspective on our own situations from the stuff we've learned in our own life. But listening to someone else and how they maybe handled something or how they view something that happened in their life that may be similar to what you've gone through, and that they have a different perspective on it and different information, whatever, I think it benefits everybody.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a trainee in showbiz, I started as an assistant director, and I was a trainee first on movies and TV shows. And we used to go to these seminars, and I hated going to the seminars, but we had to learn things like working with children and animals and all the union rules and stuff. So we had to go to these seminars on Saturdays. The best thing about these seminars, because being a trainee was so hard, you're the lowest of the low on the totem pole, you are working your ass off, you're often treated like crap, especially if you're a little blonde girl in her 20s telling the men what they should be doing. But when we went to these seminars, I was with all the other trainees, and we shared our war stories. And even if I was dead tired and I hated the subject of the seminar, I always left feeling better about myself, because I realized I wasn't the only one going through all this stuff. And I really do think that sharing more with people, and if you do it on a podcast, they can listen, they can not listen. It's not like you're trapping someone in a conversation they don't want to have.
That's what I love about podcasts, in that you could be on Instagram and you're looking at a hashtag, or maybe on Facebook, a friend liked something. So you could have things in front of you that you weren't necessarily looking for. Mm-hmm. But on a podcast, you press play.
Yep.
It's like, it's so intentional. And so you're already in the headspace that you're open to what's on the other side.
Right.
And so you're looking for that content. And I feel like authenticity and vulnerability sort of overlap.
Because they both have fear involved. I think a lot of people are afraid to be who they are, and a lot of people don't even know who they are because they're surrounded by other people or organizations or wherever, workplace environments that they feel dictate who they are, and they're defining themselves from the outside in.
And by their roles or by their relationships.
Right. Like on my last podcast with Rick and Elaine, which is, we talk about self-reflection and how I know people that are older than me that have zero self-reflection. They don't think about how they appear to the outside world, to others. They're so in their own head. Right. And it's one of the reasons why I love to travel. My life has been a project in filling the voids. I don't have kids, so I mentored a young girl for years and years. I was originally going to get into politics, and I have a passion towards that. And I didn't go in that direction. I did showbiz instead.
They're very similar.
Because I'm
let's
crazy.
Be honest.
I know. But I got really involved with my union politics all through my 30s, and that fulfilled those desires. And filling the voids and getting a greater perspective on who I am and experiencing life. I think those things have kind of defined me. Travel has been a big part of my life, and not just because I like to go and do fun things, but because it gives me perspective. I always come back here to Los Angeles, and I have a different perspective on my city, on everything around me, on me. And I don't limit my travel to just, staying at the Hilton in London. I like to go to Ecuador, Peru, and Argentina, and Bosnia, and Croatia. Wow. But when you travel and see the world and you realize that people are so much more alike than they are different.
Yeah.
What's different is the outside. The inside of people are very similar.
We all want the same things.
Well, yeah, ultimately. Yeah, and what makes us different is where we're from, who we're around, our level of education, all the outside stuff that goes into us. But basically, we all inside do want the same things.
Yeah.
And I think travel really gives you a perspective on what you have and how fortunate you are. Being grateful has been a huge part of my life, especially in recent years. I heard the whole Oprah thing, make sure you keep a gratitude journal, be grateful. And it took me a while before I really started doing that. But I'm so grateful, I don't have parents, I don't have family, I don't have kids, I don't have a lot of stuff, but I'm super grateful for my life. I've worked my ass off, I've had a lot of tragedies, but I'm enjoying the journey and the experiences. And I never get bored. There's always something to do. Right. People are like, oh, this pandemic, bored. No, you know what? I'm working on a podcast now. No, I'm writing now. I find things to do.
Right.
And that doesn't mean I'm not afraid to do them. I think, like I said, being authentic and being vulnerable, it takes a lot of courage.
I always say it's a daily act of courage just showing up as yourself.
Yes.
So never mind putting it out there. I believe that authenticity and vulnerability is the only way we can truly connect with another human being.
Absolutely.
We started working together and, my brother-in-law died and then my sister died. And I just remember because as a fellow TV person and a very strong work ethic, it was extremely hard for me to be like, Katy, I'm out. And it wasn't just I'm out for travel, but it was I'm out emotionally for a bit. And we had worked together, but I feel like that's when you and I hit another level in our friendship, was when I couldn't be what I thought you needed to be. Like, I've got it. Don't worry. I've got your back. I was like, I don't have it right now.
We're so hard on ourselves.
So hard on ourselves.
And that's been a big problem for me, not only dealing with myself, but dealing with others, because I hold myself to a high standard and I tend to hold the same standard to other people. And I think that's a recipe for disappointment because everybody's starting from a different place. Everybody has different priorities. Everybody has different information, especially nowadays. And so not being so hard on yourself is something I've worked on. And it's bled into me being not so hard on other people, I think.
Yeah.
And
I don't think you can actually give other people the grace to make mistakes if you don't start with yourself. Mm-hmm. I remember 20 years ago working in TV at a specific job, and I was the creative director. And I said to one of the producers, I said, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself.
Right.
And she turned to me and she said, that's not comforting. You're a workaholic.
Gotcha.
And I was like, wow, I truly thought I was this great manager, right? Because I was willing to get in there and roll up my sleeves and all of that stuff. And I realized that I had no sense of balance. You know, I had no sense of
such an important word, balance.
balance. I mean, in some ways it's bullshit, because I think the people who think you can walk through life always balance. For example, like I work really long hours and I do all these great things. And if one of my kids gets sick, like balance is out the window. Like that's where I'm going.
Well, it's your priorities.
Right. So it's really balance within. It's not balance in your day. It's balance within. So tell me what balance means to you.
Well, you know, I teach a class at USC and I absolutely love it. And I always tell my students, you have to have balance in your life, showbiz especially. And there's a lot of careers like this, tech, anything in tech really. There's a lot of careers that just take over your life. And you may enjoy it so much that it becomes your life. It becomes your identity. And you don't, cliche, stop and smell the roses. But you have to, I mean, it's such a cultural thing with Americans too, to be workaholics, that like that's a badge of honor. You know what? When I work my ass off. But you know what? I make a point of taking time off if I'm able to. I mean, we have the luxury of being able to balance sometimes, but I think having more than just work in your life, more than just family in your life, having those times when you can be just with yourself, giving yourself one of those, Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way says, have a date with yourself every week. And I think that's so important, to take time to just be with yourself. It'll give you perspective on everything else in your life. And when one aspect of your life consumes you, everything gets out of whack. And it's not ultimately going to be fulfilling. And you don't want something to be your identity that's not you. You're not your job. You're not this organization. You're not your family. You're you. And you have all of these other things in your life. And I think we all need to nurture all aspects of our life, including ourselves. But we usually put ourselves last. It's an effort sometimes not to. And others can think you're being selfish or not be as thrilled with you saying, no, I need to go get a massage this afternoon. No, I need to go take a walk. I'm not ready for this conversation right, whatever. And taking care of you. And I think that sometimes falls short. It's the last priority for a lot of people.
Right. Okay, let's play a little game here. So this like alien creature comes down from outer space and, asks how it works. Okay, you're a woman on Earth. How does it work? And you're like, well, you work really hard and then you take care of lots of people and all the things that make you happy and feel good about yourself, you put those last. Can you imagine explaining to someone like, this is what we do, but this is what we do? It's so crazy. And so I feel like you have really solid self-care boundaries that when you like, oh, I've hit a wall, or you just seem like you have the ability to put yourself first. Was that always the case?
No. A big part of who I am came from my mother, and it wasn't a positive aspect of my mother. My mom saw obstacles at every corner. There was always a reason she couldn't do something. It drove me crazy. It's easy for me to take care of myself because I don't have children and I'm not married. I have a relationship to take care of, and I try to take care of him as best as I can, while also monitoring whether he's taking care of me, which is important.
Right.
But I think seeing my mother not take care of herself, seeing obstacles every step of the way, and watching her life just go away really had an impact on me. She died in her 50s. She was an anorexic alcoholic. She drank herself to death. There was nothing anybody could do. And I vowed early on I was never going to be like that. I was never going to be afraid of everything. I was never going to see those obstacles. If there's an obstacle, how can I get around it? I don't like being told no. That's like a challenge to me, but I'll accept it if I think it through and it's a reasonable no. But I don't know. It's all this self-reflection. It's difficult, Jackie.
I know. Do you believe when somebody sees obstacles in their way at every turn that it's something that's real or that they've created or both? Like, how do you see obstacles?
I think it's something they've created.
Yeah.
I give them the benefit of the doubt a few times, but after a while, it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? There's that old saying, nobody wants to help somebody who doesn't help themselves. And I think it's because I didn't come from a loving, nurturing family. I've always been very self-sufficient. I often find my mojo when I feel secure, when I feel safe. And I've never had the luxury of being able to depend on anybody else making me feel that way. So I have to create my own security and my own safety. I think when people are always seeing obstacles, it's fear. I have some friends now who we've been friends for decades. We were all in our early 20s working together, and I thought they were so talented, so beautiful, male or female, and smart and funny and educated, but there was always something stopping them from moving forward. And they never did. And here we are 30 years later. And I worry about their future at this point. It makes me sad when people don't live up to who they are. And, we're never all going to achieve all of our hopes and dreams. Right. And we're not meant to. Dreams are dreams. Makes us happy thinking about them. And we achieve the ones that are achievable, that we focus on, that we try to achieve. But I think fear is the biggest obstacle to happiness and to mojo and to authenticity and to vulnerability. And they're not going to like me. They're going to think something of me, or nobody cares. And it's just not true. I think you get the opposite effect when you put yourself out there.
Right. And when you talk about accomplishing, we're not talking about you have to get out and get another degree or get that raise. Like, we're talking about doing things in your life, like even if it is travel. Yeah. Or it's open up that flower shop in your community.
Or putting my garden together. When I come in after a day of gardening and I feel good, I've created beauty. I've improved my home. My surroundings are super important to me. So I get that sense of accomplishment. It doesn't have to be work related or travel related or anything that even costs money. I feel good about myself when I finish reading a book, when I clean my house, when I do my garden. And that's what makes me feel good.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Like 20 years ago, it would be like what I accomplish in the outside world, what I accomplish that others can see. And now it's more, I feel good when I accomplish something that matters to me. That's meaningful.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that work isn't still meaningful. You're still kicking ass, teaching and directing and finally getting back into the studio.
Yeah, no kidding. It's going to be an adventure, all the COVID rules and stuff.
Oh my
gosh.
But
I don't get my sense of accomplishment really from any particular work situation, whether it be teaching or it's a bigger picture for me. Am I doing things that I like to do? Am I doing things that fulfill me? I've reached a point in my life where I started thinking about my legacy and what's going to be left behind of me when I'm gone. And that's important to me. And that may be silly, and that may be egocentric, but I think that we live as long as people remember us. And I want to make an impact on other people while I'm here. I know that I'm making a difference teaching. I hear it from my students. And that's important to me, especially at this point in my life. And I think I've always been a big advocate of doing volunteer work. All that service I did at the Directors Guild. And then I got into mentoring, which is all service. We do service to fill voids in our life often, but it's really true that when you volunteer, when you do things for others, it makes you feel great. And that's a bigger sense of accomplishment to me than doing something for myself. I guess it's different kinds of accomplishments, but it all factors into your mojo and your self-worth.
Right. If you were to teach a class, as you are Professor Garretson, if you were to teach a class on how to thrive over 40, what would be included in the syllabus?
I have to tell you, I love your podcast, but a little piece of me, and I think I've said this to you before, pulls back when I hear 40 thrive, thriving over 40, because to me, it relies on a false premise, yet real in society, false for me. As much as I hate physically getting older, I love almost everything else about it. And I've never seen age as an obstacle. There are markers in my life where, I turned 25. Oh God, I guess I'm never going to be Miss America. Okay, well, I can check that off, Certain things that I know I'm not going to be able to achieve. But there's God, it's just such a wonderful world. And there's so much out there. There's so much to explore and learn that the only thing that really scares me is getting too old to do the things that I want to do. And I think psychologically, we all stick at a certain age. And I think I'm about 33 inside. My boyfriend is 37.
Now he's an older man.
So, yes, I guess you could say that. In real life, he's considerably younger, and we've been together over 5 years now. And he was supposed to be the weekend fling after I filed for divorce, and somehow he's stuck. But I've always, maybe I'm emotionally immature, maybe I just have a childlike energy at times, but I love youth. I love hanging out with younger people. I giggle as much as the next girl. I find joy in having that side of me out there. Being appropriate has never been something I've really adhered to. I got to be who I am. I feel like I skew young. So getting back to 40 Thrive, I always thought, well, why wouldn't we thrive over 40? And I think that, I'm a little bit older than you, but I think we grew up in a time when, oh, wow, especially in Hollywood, you hit 40 and it's all downhill from there. And, everything's gone. And what have you got? And I hate seeing women have that mindset. I see women having that mindset at 30.
Yeah.
What am I doing with my life at 30? And it's like, wow, honey, relax.
Right.
I didn't know what I was doing with my life at 50, and I've had a great ride. So, you don't have to know all the time. I think it's just an attitude, and to fight through the fear. If you want something, go for it. There was a point in my life where I saw showbiz kind of dwindling because I was getting older, and there is that age, factor in our business.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, what do I like to do? I like to travel. I've always wanted to work in government and politics. And so I almost went in the Foreign Service. I went through 2 years of training, and I got on the hiring list for the State Department. When Hillary was Secretary of State, it was a very challenging, difficult process.
Aren't there only like a few people in the world who get as far as you did?
To get that black passport. Yes, the diplomat. I would have been a diplomat. And I was literally on my way to doing that when I met my ex-husband and decided to get married instead. And maybe a little piece of me leaned in towards the marriage side and ignored the red flags because I was afraid of that life with the Foreign Service where I'd be living in different posts around the world every 2 years. It was exciting, but it was scary. It was daunting. I don't know. I do wonder about the path not taken, though.
Well, sometimes fear is appropriate.
Yeah, it's protective.
It is protective.
We have fears because something is telling us that we have to protect ourselves.
Right. Like if you're walking across the street and you have fear of getting hit by a car, that's a reasonable fear.
Right. Reasonable is the word, though.
Yes.
Is your fear reasonable? I'm telling you, Jackie, the night before that first podcast episode posted, and it's pretty much my life highlight spiel in that episode, I was petrified all night long. Mika could tell you, I was like, oh my God, it's just the biggest, everybody's going to know everything about me. And oh my God, and I'm feeling so vulnerable right now. And I was so scared, but I did it. And I'm so glad I did it. And I don't think there's ever been a time when I've been afraid to do something, but did it anyway, and then had regrets. You know, because even if something doesn't work out, you learn from it. My marriage didn't work out, but you know what? I don't consider it a failure. I had some great times. I had a great wedding. I've done it. I don't necessarily need to do it again. I gave it my all and it didn't work out. So it doesn't work out. Not everything's meant to last forever. And that's another philosophy I have. You know, not everything is meant to last forever. You have to be okay with moving on from things because sometimes it's really healthy, not just for you, but for the other person.
Yeah, I think everything is seasonal,
Yeah.
right? And the season may be a few months, but the season may be 20 years.
Right.
It just all depends. So, you know, it could be work, it could be relationships, it could be other hobbies that you have. And I think sometimes we look back and then we judge ourselves if
Deadly.
we're not living our life the way we thought we would 10 years ago.
Yeah, you can't do that. You just can't do that. Very few things in life are necessarily meant to last forever because every day I'm a different person than I was the day before.
Yes.
You have it, I have it. We have a curiosity. We want to grow. We want to learn. We want to meet people. We want to experience things because that's what life is all about. I mean, this is a journey. You got to enjoy the ride. You can't just live for an outcome of something. You have to enjoy the process. And if you're not enjoying it, you got to make some changes. Change is rarely easy, and it's always something that I'm afraid of. But you got to fight through that sometimes in order to go to your next chapter in life, to grow, to evolve. And if you grow and evolve and learn and within yourself, over the course of years, ideally the person you're with also has. And there may come a point in time where you say, God, we are different people than we were when we first met.
If you're doing it right, you are different people.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe you don't complement each other like you used to. Maybe you're not codependent anymore. Maybe you don't need that person's approval for your happiness. It's a tough thing, but
Don't worry, honey. She's not talking about you if you're listening.
no, I'm not talking about anyone in my present world at all. Not at all.
So sometimes we look back and judge maybe the things we didn't do or the things we did or the choices we made. And I've said this on previous podcasts. You at that time were not who you are today.
Right.
You made your choices based on who you were then. You cannot expect this experienced human being you are today to make the same choices that you did back then.
You have to realize that we all do the best we can every moment of every day with what we know at that moment on that day. And at another point in time, when our emotions are different, when our environment is different, when the people involved are different, we might make a different choice. But regrets and judgment, I mean, it's a hard thing to avoid, not looking back. There's things I look back in my life. It's like, oh God, I'm so embarrassed that I did that. Or
They're mostly people I dated.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that. Trial and error, baby. Everything is growth, you know, take from every relationship the good part and then carry it on to the next part and don't do the bad part again. But you can't have regrets. You just can't. You just have to have that attitude like, God, I wish I would have done this. That would have been great, but I didn't. So, and here I am. So I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. And sometimes you're just curious about what would have happened, and it might not have even been something that would have been better. But that's another reason I did the podcast too, because I did not have good parenting. I did not grow up in a house of love. I had to learn everything, almost everything, about how to survive in this world on my own. And I wish I'd had a big sister or big brother or the mom I never had, the dad I never had, but I didn't. And, you know, that's okay. That's okay. I've done okay, and I've learned things along the way. And I think that's probably why I've always sought to grow from relationships and experiences, because that's how I'm still learning.
Right. You know, it's interesting that you say that, because you look at your life and like what it could have been, right? If you had parents who had different experiences, and you look at like if you had a big brother, a big sister. But I also have never heard you, at least to me, express, like, I never hear you say, life didn't turn out the way I had imagined. Life didn't turn out the way I had hoped. And I think we all have that, right? Sometimes whether it's we didn't have the upbringing we wanted, or maybe people who did want to have children and haven't had children. Or I know for me, in all of my surgeries, I don't look at anything like how I thought I would look at this. But my point is, like, when I look at myself in the past, I'd go, oh, well, life did not go the way I thought it would. Look at me. And now I look at myself and I go, thanks, life. Because I learned things I could have never imagined learning because of it.
I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be Mojo Girl if I had had the luxuries of good parenting. I might have been super, super successful because I would have had more opportunity and benefits because of coming from that. But I didn't. I had to do it myself. But I wouldn't be me. I'd be a completely different person.
Yeah.
And I think I don't say my life didn't turn out the way I thought it would because I never thought about how it would turn out. I was always just trying to survive and enjoy the ride. You know, it was a tough thing for me where children are concerned because, you know, I think most women, at least when we grew up, thinking, oh, we're going to have children, we're going to be married and have children. I never had that burning, yearning desire to birth a child. I love kids. I love working with kids. My mom was an elementary school teacher. You know, I ran the nonprofit. I mentored. But it still was kind of a head trip. I had some surgeries too and had all my female parts taken out, so I couldn't have kids at a point in my life where I still could have. And that was a real head trip because even though I knew I really didn't want to, the finality of it was, wow, okay, well, I guess that's going to be my life. That option is taken away. And, you know, it is what it is. What good is it to dwell on it? And another thing, when I had a hysterectomy, oophorectomy, cervixectomy, everything's gone inside. Yeah. And
I always say if you listen real close when I walk, you can hear the clanking. Yeah.
I love that. Me
Things
too.
are just moving around. Yeah.
I was so scared about that surgery. You know, I was going to go into overnight menopause, surgical menopause, because I would have nothing in my body producing hormones. And I thought, oh God, I'm just going to turn into like this gray old shriveled up lady and I'm not even 50 yet. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because you know what? Once I got rid of all that stuff, my emotions really kind of leveled out a lot. I no longer had obviously all of the physical discomfort that I had been experiencing, which was glorious. But I really think that the change to my personality was just wonderful. And I feel like it's the best thing I ever did, having that surgery. You know, it's not like I had a choice, but to be so afraid of it and then to realize on the other end that all those fears were just completely wrong. And I think that's a lesson because so many things that we are afraid of, gosh, like when you're in a bad relationship and you finally get the strength to get out of it and you think, why didn't I do that before? This feels so great.
Why didn't I do that sooner? How many times have we said that, right?
Right? Yeah.
I feel like we have done our part in solving all of the world problems for midlife women today. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
This was very healing, actually, just talking about all this stuff.
It's such a wild journey. I'm so glad to be on it with you.
Well, I'm glad to be on it with you.
Thank you so much for listening. Let me ask you 2 quick questions. Have you subscribed? It's easy to do and helps you get alerts when a new episode is up in your favorite podcast app. And have you shared it with a friend? That's the simplest way to help grow the show and help more and more women over 40 thrive. I really appreciate you pressing play today. I know you have a lot going on and it's not lost on me. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.